أهلا ماي المصري في مصر وفي جونة مع eniGma magazine.
شكرا.
You studied film in the US. When you were studying, were you actually thinking of doing these raw documentaries? Was that at the back of your mind?
Well, that's a good question. I was very lucky, I think, to have started at a young age. I was 17. I'd just come from Beirut, which was in war, Lebanon, to the US, to San Francisco. And I walked into a film class and it was love at first sight. I found my calling right away. And I did feel that I wanted to finish quickly, even though it was fascinating, you know, in the film, watching films, talking about films, meeting people. But I wanted to come back and make films that reflect what I had lived through, that tell a strong story, a human story, and because being Palestinian, I think I had a lot to say.
Of course,
And
of course.
Being a woman too, I think all those played a role, and being raised at a time that was so fascinating, the 70s,
Right,
you know,
right.
so much going on, the student movement, the engagement, the excitement of the moment. So I think all those elements were important for me and in my decision to work and make documentaries. But I think that one of the main determining factors was meeting my husband, Jean Chamoun,
Yes.
who was also had the same approach in life,
Yes.
the same ideas, the same passion, you know. So we were like a couple working, you know,
You were making the films
making
together.
films together, living with people, telling their stories, especially people whose stories you never saw on film.
So what made you switch then to the narrative?
You know, it's a continuation for me. It's not really a switch at all.
Yeah.
It's a continuation of experience that I've started 30 years ago with similar themes, but in a new form. Fiction, I think with narrative, you have more control over maybe the storytelling.
Yes, yes.
But I'm very interested in, using the same elements that I would in a documentary, which is true stories, strong characters, that raw, that you mentioned, that
Yes,
word raw is
yeah.
important.
Yes.
That's not too, you know, studio-like, something
No,
that you feel is real, that speaks to you and touches you. And I think this is the power of cinema.
But the film, the 3,000 Nights, that's based on a true story?
Yes, of course.
yes,
It's
of
based
course.
on a true story
Yes.
of a woman I met many years ago who told me her story. She had a child. She's Palestinian.
Yeah.
She had her child inside an Israeli prison. So this story was very powerful.
Amazing,
And I
yeah.
felt I had to tell her story. And I worked a lot with on preparation, interviews with the actual prisoners before starting to write. But at one point you have to think in terms of the aesthetic, in terms of cinema, and try to create some kind of, you know, fusion between the real and the imagined.
Yes, yes. And you got so many awards for that film.
Yes,
It was
28
a
awards.
fantastic film, yes, yes.
Thank you.
So what are the challenges that you face in doing this kind of work?
I think the biggest challenge is finding the funding in the Arab world, because we don't have enough support or infrastructure.
Yes, yes.
Especially where I come from, Palestine is under occupation, Lebanon there's war, so we don't have enough, we don't have a cultural, like funds. And I think in general there's a problem with distribution in the Arab world, especially for independent cinema.
Yes.
There are enormous challenges, and being a woman, of course, is also another challenge,
Adds to
but
that.
I think that, you know, it's like more of an incentive to make films. But I feel there's so many powerful stories that it's possible to overcome all these challenges. That's why you're seeing so many interesting films coming out on out of very difficult conditions. And I think difficulty creates challenge,
Of course, what's great about your films is that even though they are all based in the Middle East, but the human stories are applicable really, and people from all over the world can connect to
That's
them.
true.
So are you thinking of confining yourself to the Middle East, or are you going to broaden the scope? Or
Well, I mean, I'm interested, I think, in any human story from around the world. But I feel because I know, I know my own reality so
Exactly.
much, and there's so many stories I still want to tell. And in the end, like you said, the human story is universal.
Exactly.
And people can relate to it. And I've noticed this, screening 3,000 nights around the world, whether I was in India or Japan or Australia or the US or Latin America. You know, it's kind of similar reactions. People can understand human kind of stories, that they can be touched, they can, you know, it really, so it doesn't really matter. But I am fascinated. I won't, you know, I'm not confined. I don't feel that. I'm fascinated by the human stories of resilience and resistance and strong women, imagination.
Yeah.
I think these are like gives you so much hope.
So will you continue in the narrative or the documentaries? Your next project, for instance.
My next project is narrative.
Narrative again.
I'm in a phase, I
great.
think, of reflection on what I've lived through. It's a you know, of considering certain stories I've heard, turning them into narratives.
Fantastic.
But if there's a strong documentary, I will, of course.
You will.
I won't
Whatever
say
comes
no.
your way. Thank you very much, Mai
Thank you.
Masry. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.